All right, let's dive in.
Number 7. The Alecton Incident. In 1861, the ocean had secrets that science hadn't even begun to touch. Darwin had just published his theory of evolution 2 years earlier. The deep sea was essentially outer space. Nobody knew what lived down there, and most people didn't want to find out. Then, on November 30th, the French naval vessel Alecton was sailing near the Canary Islands when the crew spotted something in the water that made absolutely no sense. A reddish-brown mass, roughly 6 meters long, moving at the surface with slow, deliberate purpose. It had massive tentacles, enormous eyes, and a body unlike anything the sailors had ever seen. The captain, Lieutenant Boyer, ordered his men to capture it. What followed was one of the most chaotic maritime encounters in recorded history. The crew fired harpoons. The harpoons sank into the creature's flesh but couldn't hold. The body was so gelatinous, so soft, that the weapons tore right through it like it was wet paper. They threw ropes, they hauled, they fought this thing for hours, and when they finally managed to hoist part of it out of the water, the body split and most of the animal slipped back beneath the surface. All they recovered was a chunk of tail, about 2 meters of strange, rubbery, alien-looking tissue. They brought it back to port. Scientists were baffled. The French Academy of Sciences debated whether the creature even existed. Some members thought the sailors had lost their minds, but the physical evidence was right there in front of them and it couldn't be explained away. Here's the part most people don't know. A writer named Jules Verne read the detailed report of the Alecton incident. A few years later, he published 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and yes, that giant squid attack scene, directly inspired by what happened to that crew. The monster you imagined as a kid reading that book was based on a real encounter, real sailors, real terror, and that was just the beginning.
Number 6. The Boy with the Axe. If the Alecton incident sounds dramatic, wait until you hear about a 12-year-old kid who won a fight against a Kraken with nothing but a hand axe and what can only be described as an absolutely unhinged amount of courage. October 1873, Fortune Bay, Newfoundland, Canada. The North Atlantic in October is not a pleasant place to be. Cold gray water, cold gray sky, the kind of light that makes everything feel slightly ominous even on a calm day. Two fishermen, Daniel Squires and Theophilus Picot, were out on a small wooden boat running their usual routes, with Theophilus's 12-year-old son Tom along for the trip. It was a normal morning, routine work on familiar water, the kind of day where nothing is supposed to happen. They spotted what looked like a large piece of floating debris in the water ahead, a brownish, irregular mass drifting just below the surface. Standard stuff. The ocean is full of floating junk. One of the men leaned over and poked it with an oar to move it out of the way. The debris woke up. In a matter of seconds, the creature, a giant squid that had been resting or possibly dying at the surface, exploded into movement. Two massive tentacles shot out of the water and wrapped around the boat. Not around the outside of the hull, around the boat, over the sides, gripping the wood with hundreds of suckers lined with sharp serrated edges. The small vessel lurched hard to one side. Water came over the gunwale. The animal's weight and pull were enough to tilt the entire boat toward the surface at a dangerous angle. The two adult fishermen froze completely. Decades of experience at sea had not prepared either of them for this specific scenario. Daniel Squires later described the moment as one of complete mental paralysis. His brain simply could not process what was happening fast enough to generate a useful response. Tom Picot, 12 years old, did not freeze. Without hesitating, the boy grabbed a hand axe from the bottom of the boat, leaned over the side of the tilting vessel, and hacked through two of the tentacles in a series of rapid, desperate blows. The squid, apparently deciding very quickly that this situation had become more trouble than it was worth, released the boat and disappeared beneath the surface. The whole encounter lasted less than 2 minutes. They brought the severed tentacles back to shore. One of them, when laid out on the dock, measured nearly 6 meters from the cut end to the tip, and that was just the portion Tom had managed to cut off. Professor Alexander Murray of the Geological Survey of Canada examined the specimens and confirmed what the entire fishing community of Fortune Bay was already saying to each other in terrified whispers. This was no known animal. No whale appendage, no giant fish fin, no unusual kelp formation. The Kraken was real. It lived in their waters. It had grabbed their neighbor's boat with his son inside it. And the only reason that boy was alive was because he didn't stop to think about how impossible the situation was. He just grabbed the nearest sharp object and started swinging. The severed tentacle eventually made its way to the Natural History Museum in London, where it was studied, catalogued, and became one of the first pieces of physical evidence confirming that giant squid were not merely legend. And speaking of encounters that somehow got weirder, the next one involves a squid that apparently developed a very specific obsession. Number 5. The ship that got hugged. Most sea monster stories follow a recognizable pattern. Monster appears, monster attacks, crew fights for their lives, someone probably dies. But the story of the Norwegian tanker Brunswick follows none of that pattern. The Brunswick was a large, steel-hulled oil tanker operating in the South Pacific in the 1930s. Not a small vessel, this was an industrial ship built for carrying enormous quantities of petroleum across open ocean, with a dark painted hull that sat low and massive in the water. On multiple separate occasions over the course of its voyages, the ship was approached by a giant squid that did something nobody had ever reported a squid doing before. It wrapped its tentacles around the hull and held on. Not attacking, not trying to pull the ship down, not going after the crew, just holding on to the ship, embracing it with what the crew could only describe as apparent determination. Marine biologists who later analyzed the reports developed what is now the most widely accepted explanation. The squid was almost certainly confusing the Brunswick for a sperm whale. Sperm whales are the giant squid's primary natural predator, and also, paradoxically, the giant squid's most common prey when the squid is large enough. What they can say for certain is that the squid couldn't get any grip on the steel's surface. The suckers and hooks that would have torn through a whale's flesh simply skidded off the metal. The animal would heave and strain and pull, its tentacles scraping uselessly along the hull, unable to find purchase. And then, each time, the squid would slide backward along the ship's side, directly into the massive spinning propellers at the stern. The Brunswick survived every encounter completely unharmed. The squid did not. These encounters weren't rare enough to be remarkable, they were just part of what the ocean was like out there, in those waters, in that era, before we'd mapped everything and named everything and convinced ourselves we understood what lived in the deep. Number 4. The first photo. For everything that came before, the Alecton, Tom Picot's axe, the Brunswick incidents, dozens of other sailor accounts across centuries of maritime history, scientists still lacked one crucial thing: a photograph of a living giant squid in its natural habitat. Not a dead specimen washed up on a beach with its colors faded and its body collapsed under its own weight on land. Not a piece of tentacle in a museum jar. A living animal in the deep ocean doing what living animals do. The absence of this evidence was, depending on who you asked, either perfectly understandable or deeply suspicious. The ocean is vast. The giant squid lives between 300 and 1,000 meters down, a zone called the mesopelagic, or twilight zone, where sunlight barely penetrates and the pressure crushes most equipment. Getting a camera down there and back was already extraordinarily difficult. That changed in September 2004, at approximately 900 meters below the surface of the North Pacific Ocean. Dr. Tsunemi Kubodera and his colleague Kiyoshi Mori from the National Science Museum of Japan had been attempting this for years. Their method was deceptively simple in concept and extraordinarily difficult in practice. Attach a camera to a weighted line, bait the line with squid commonly eaten by sperm whales and therefore likely familiar to giant squid as prey or competitors, lower it to depth, and wait. The camera was programmed to take an automatic photograph every 30 seconds. They had no live feed, no way of knowing what was happening down there in real time. They lowered the equipment, marked the position, and came back hours later to see what, if anything, the camera had captured. On this particular deployment, the camera took 556 photographs over the course of approximately 4 hours. When the images were developed and reviewed, the team found what they had been searching for. At around 900 meters depth, a giant squid had found the bait. The photographs showed the animal approaching with what could only be described as aggressive intent. tentacles spread wide in what marine biologists call a spreading posture, used when a squid is preparing to capture prey. It attacked the bait directly, driving its tentacles into the bait squid with force. In doing so, it became briefly entangled in the camera line itself, and the photographs captured this struggle in extraordinary detail. After some time, the squid tore itself free. It left behind a feeding tentacle nearly 6 meters long, wrapped around the line, severed cleanly where it had pulled away from the animal's body. The photographs ran on the front pages of newspapers worldwide. Scientific journals published them with lengthy commentary. Marine biologists described the squid's behavior as far more active and aggressive than previously assumed, and they left behind one question that nobody could quite shake. If this animal had been living at 900 meters depth in waters visited by human expeditions for centuries without ever being photographed, how many other things are down there in the dark, in waters we think we know that we simply haven't managed to point a camera at yet? Number 3, the Colossal One. Okay, stop for a second, because I need to make sure you understand something before we go further. Everything we've discussed so far, the Alecton, Tom Peacock, the Brunswick, the 2004 photographs, all of it involves the giant squid. But the giant squid is not the largest squid in the ocean, not even close. There is another species, discovered later, studied far less, and in almost every measurable way, more terrifying than the giant squid that has occupied human nightmares for centuries. Its name is Mesonychothus hamiltoni, the colossal squid. And the difference between it and Architeuthis is roughly the difference between a large dog and a fully grown polar bear. In February 2007, a commercial fishing vessel called the San Aspiring was operating in the Ross Sea, near Antarctica, some of the most remote and hostile waters on the planet, where the Southern Ocean pushes against the Antarctic ice shelf and the water temperature hovers just above freezing year-round. The crew was fishing for Patagonian toothfish, a deep-water species that lives at significant depths and is sold commercially as Chilean sea bass. They hauled up their lines and found something attached to a toothfish they'd already caught, something that had been feeding on the fish while it was still on the hook and hadn't let go when the line came up. When the crew pulled the animal to the surface, they initially didn't fully understand what they were looking at. It took several minutes of the entire crew standing at the rail in silence before anyone spoke. The colossal squid weighed 495 kilograms, 10 meters in length, larger and heavier than any squid specimen ever previously recovered. The crew managed to haul it aboard and store it in freezing conditions, and when the vessel returned to port in New Zealand, the specimen was transported to Te Papa Tongarewa, New Zealand's National Museum, where it became arguably the most important zoological specimen recovered in decades. The scientific examination took days. Researchers worked methodically through the animal, documenting measurements, tissue samples, and structural details. What they found confirmed and exceeded every prediction about the species. The eyes measured 27 centimeters in diameter, the largest eyes of any known animal on Earth, living or extinct. Eyes that size, at depth, are designed for one thing: detecting the bioluminescent glow of predators moving in total darkness hundreds of meters below the surface. The colossal squid doesn't navigate its world by sight in any way we would recognize. It reads light the way we read sound, as a warning system, a hunting tool, a map of an invisible world. Scientists estimated, based on the specimen's size relative to juvenile examples previously studied, that this individual may not have been fully grown. But at least we have photographs now, right? We have video. We can document what's down there. Actually, about that. Number 2, the video. Photographs changed everything in 2004, but video was a different challenge entirely, and the scientific community knew it. A series of still images, however extraordinary, could always be questioned: lighting, angle, scale, interpretation. Video would be definitive. Video would show the animal moving, hunting, behaving as a living organism in its actual environment. Getting that video took 8 more years. The expedition that finally captured it was a major international collaboration. Dr. Tsunemi Kubodera, again, now considered the world's leading expert on giant squid, working alongside a team assembled with funding from Discovery Channel in the United States and NHK, Japan's national public broadcasting organization. The resources available were substantially greater than anything deployed in 2004, a research vessel purpose-equipped for deep-sea work, a two-person submersible capable of reaching significant depths, and camera technology that had advanced considerably in the intervening years. The key technical innovation was the lighting system. The team had studied how giant squid eyes work in detail following the 2004 photographs, and what they found informed everything about the 2012 approach. Giant squid eyes are optimized for bioluminescent light, the natural glow produced by living organisms in the deep ocean. They can detect extraordinarily faint blue-green light in total darkness, but they appear to have very limited sensitivity to infrared wavelengths, the far end of the light spectrum, completely invisible to the human eye without equipment, and apparently invisible to Architeuthis as well. The team's submersible was equipped with an infrared illumination system. From the squid's perspective, the vehicle would appear dark, just another large object moving through the water, not a blazing artificial light source announcing human presence. Combined with a bioluminescent lure designed to mimic the natural glow of prey organisms, the setup was as close to invisible as human technology could make it. They descended to approximately 630 meters in the Pacific Ocean near the Ogasawara Islands, the same general area where the 2004 photographs had been taken, and waited with the infrared cameras running and the bioluminescent lures slowly pulsing in the darkness. At 7:44 in the morning, after hours of waiting in the cramped submersible in complete darkness, a giant squid emerged from the blockwater and moved directly toward the lure. The footage that followed ran for several minutes and showed something that rewrote the scientific understanding of this animal's behavior. The squid was not the sluggish, drifting creature some researchers had continued to imagine even after the 2004 photographs. It moved with speed and absolute precision, altering its trajectory multiple times as it approached the lure, changing angle and depth in ways that clearly indicated active, intelligent assessment of its target. It attacked the lure decisively, with tentacles spreading in the full hunting posture, and then, realizing the lure wasn't prey, it turned and retreated back into the darkness with the same fluid, rapid grace. The footage aired as part of a Discovery Channel documentary and was viewed by tens of millions of people. Scientists published analysis confirming what the video showed. Giant squid are not scavengers or passive hunters. They are fast, perceptive, active predators that assess their environment, make decisions, and pursue prey with coordinated, deliberate movement.
Number 1. The golden squid of the Gulf. Everything we've talked about, the Alecton, Tom Picot, the Brunswick, the first photos and videos, happened in remote oceans, far from shore, deep water, extreme conditions, professional expeditions. Number 1 happened in American waters, in the Gulf of Mexico, and it wasn't a historic naval vessel or a Japanese research team that captured it. It was a NOAA research camera, deployed as part of a routine deep-sea survey. In June 2019, the exploration vessel Nautilus was operating in the Gulf of Mexico when its remotely operated vehicle detected movement at approximately 750 meters depth. The ROV's camera began recording. Within seconds, a juvenile giant squid appeared directly in front of the lens. What makes this encounter different from every previous one is behavior. The squid didn't flee from the lights, it didn't retreat. It approached the camera with what the research team described in official reports as apparent aggression. It circled the device slowly, it oriented itself directly toward the lens, and then it struck, hitting the camera housing with its tentacles before vanishing back into the black. This wasn't a deep ocean animal stumbling into an expedition. This was a predator investigating an unfamiliar object and deciding to engage with it. The NOAA researchers described it as actively hunting behavior toward an object it had never encountered before.
The full video was released publicly and went viral immediately. Scientists noted that the squid's arms showed the characteristic suckers and hooks in extraordinary detail, and that its behavior completely overturned the idea that giant squid were slow, passive scavengers drifting in the deep. We've been to the moon more times than we've reached the bottom of our own ocean. And down there, in the dark, something with eyes the size of dinner plates and hooks on its tentacles has been watching us every time we've sent something down to look. The Kraken was never a myth.
It was always just waiting for us to find the right camera.
And there you have it, 7 encounters that make the Kraken feel terrifyingly real. Which of these fascinating cases shocked you the most? I'd love to read your thoughts, so drop your answer in the comments below. Want more chilling maritime stories? Click the video on screen now where we dive into 7 underwater experiments that went terribly wrong, where human curiosity met the crushing reality of the deep sea, and the results were anything but expected. Thanks for watching, and remember, the ocean floor may be the world's greatest treasure vault, but discovering its secrets doesn't mean you're meant to possess them.